Chapter 91. Council of Gods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Exile sighed as he led Midas and Winter over to Beans. Let me guess. You're the player Clay recruited. Beans glanced at the floor nervously. I didn't know it was your Pantheon. Exile rolled his eyes as he cursed Clay under his breath. There has to be a reason he thought she would be a good addition. Something must have happened after I returned. He eyed Beans curiously, but considering their history he was not exactly thrilled with Clay's decision to bring her into Ragnarok. I can't just reject her without letting Clay know why. Exile felt a headache brewing over the matter. Forget it. You know I can't just trust you, right? Beans nodded slowly as she met Exile's gaze while Winter and Midas wore confused expressions. I know. But I want to try to make it up to you for abandoning you. Please, let me help. Exile sighed as he studied her expression. She seemed sincere, but there was something else there. She's afraid. What's she afraid of? It only took him a few moments to realize the issue. She said she's lost contact with Donna. Kaleidoscope is after her as well. She's alone. She doesn't just want to make it up to me. She wants to feel safe. He let out a long sigh as he considered the situation. Okay. But you answer to Clay. There are no more chances. Beans nodded slowly with a worried smile on her face as Exile brushed past her to lead them to the tablet where he registered the Pantheon. After navigating the information that appeared, he was met with a notification. Are you sure you want to invite these players to Ragnarok? As soon as he agreed, Beans, Midas, and Winter quickly accepted the invitation they received. Very quickly a golden light appeared on their chests before leaving behind the badge depicting the Pantheon's emblem. King of the Gods activated. +3 authority. Exile let out a sly smile as the others celebrated their success in joining a Pantheon. Beans seemed especially happy, but Exile was only interested in the bonus authority he gained from inviting her, at least, until she proved that she was someone who could be trusted. As he was about to talk to the others, the sound of bells rang all throughout Valheim. Players all throughout the city paused what they were doing as they looked around in confusion. Confused and excited chattering began as people speculated on what it meant. Some believed that a major event was about to begin or someone had achieved something amazing. However, a select group of players received a notification. You have been invited to the Council of Gods. Please head to the tower at the center of Valheim with the other Pantheon rulers. What the hell is this? Exile frowned as he paid attention to the notification. It was clear that the others with him had not received a similar message since they were still looking around for the source of the bells. Something big is definitely happening. You guys head to the Raider's Horn, I have something to take care of. Exile commanded as he gave out directions. Hopefully, someone had returned by now to deal with them. He quickly left them behind as he moved outside of the temple. Amongst the players looking confused, he spotted several others heading towards the center of Valheim. His palms felt sweaty as he had no idea what this was about, and it was likely that he would run into Eri herself if he went along with this. I can't just ignore this though. Exile sighed as he bit the bullet and joined the others. The players who were not in a Pantheon or part of the ruling class of one stared at them as they whispered. It was clear that something was going on, but nobody had clicked on to the fact that everyone who was heading to the center of the city were leaders of different Pantheons. Eventually, the herd mentality of the players took hold as they joined the march. Eager to gain any information that they could. Exile's eyes narrowed as the tallest building he had ever seen in the city came into view. The white tower was gilded with gold and columns running down its exterior at regular intervals. It gave off a sense of grandeur far greater than anything else he had seen so far. Hey, any idea what this is about? The man walking beside him asked curiously, as they followed the crowd. No idea. Exile hesitantly replied as he eyed the stranger. That's what everyone keeps saying. The guy sighed as he glanced around at the crowd. But someone has to know something, right? Oh, I'm Beartooth, king of the Icefang Pantheon. What about you? Exile glanced at the hand that Beartooth extended towards him before shaking it. Exile, king of the Ragnarok Pantheon. Exile. Beartooth frowned as he searched his memories. Oh, you're on the rankings, right? Man, I was far too slow in getting to grips with this game. Really through me, you know. I think everyone in the first batch struggled. You must have done something right since you're still here. Exile chuckled at the friendly attitude of Beartooth. Yeah, I wouldn't say I did anything right. More like I got lucky. Or unlucky, I guess. Beartooth frowned as he glanced at Exile. What do you think of this game? Exile frowned at the strange question as the person in the lead reached the doors. But before he could say anything, the doors to the tower slid open, as if inviting them in. Okay, forget the game. Beartooth continued when Exile hesitated. Let me tell you what I think about this event. It's called the Council of Gods, right? And all of us who lead pantheons have been called here. So, I'm thinking this is where a lot of alliances and enemies are going to be made. I mean, how often do you think we'll really talk to each other with the way the game is set up? This must be what balances all the competition against each other. Chapter 92. Valheim's Purpose. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Beartooth disappeared into the crowd as they entered the tower. But Exile could not shake his words from his mind. Alliances. Exile hummed as he considered the matter. Would it really be worthwhile pursuing them? At some point, they would have to turn on each other anyway. No, this must be something more than that. The crowd walked up the solitary spiral staircase once they were inside. There was nothing special to see so far, which had them concerned. They had begun to talk amongst themselves, and many of them seemed to be thinking along the same lines as Beartooth. Exile could hear the terms of loose alliances being hashed out right there and then. However, apart from Beartooth, nobody else approached him. They left him to his own thoughts as they continued their ascension up the tower for the next few minutes. Eventually, the staircase came to an end as it led into a circular room with large windows that overlooked the city. As each player entered the room, a throne would appear, creating circular rows facing towards the center. Exile frowned as he took his seat near the back. The chatter died down as everyone got comfortable and waited to find out what the notification was all about. Once everyone was seated, a large green crystal appeared in the center of the room. The players who were present all cocked an eyebrow curiously at it. Greetings, leaders of the Skardian gods. I am Valheim. A deep voice spoke from the crystal itself. I am an artifact left behind by the old rulers. My purpose is simple. To monitor events and act as an unbiased mediator during votes and disputes. Exile's frown deepened as a bunch of players started to shout at the crystal. With the freedom they had enjoyed in this game so far, it infuriated them to discover that the developers had included a system like this. They're missing the point. Why aren't they picking up on the part about votes? To be honest, that part had Exile more worried than anything else. What were they supposed to vote on? Were all votes equal, or was it linked to the strength of a pantheon? There were too many questions, and he did not want to miss a single word that the crystal would say. Although, it did freak him out a bit to discover that the entire city was essentially a character as well. First, I would like to thank you all for responding to the summons. Now, let's get down to business. Valheim ignored the raucous complaints and turned up its own volume so as to be heard. I will now send you all the information required to proceed. Council of Gods. Valheim, the council is comprised of every king or queen of a Skardian pantheon. The council will be called to vote on a number of domestic and foreign agendas. Each ruler will be given a number of votes per issue depending on the tier of their pantheon. For example, Tier 0 is equal to 1 vote per issue, Tier 1 is equal to 2 votes per issue, etc. Each issue raised on the agenda will have two options that you can vote for. Some special cases may even require you to select a target. Each issue comes about through the logging of complaints or events that happen in all of the realms. Vote wisely, as the course of events between council sessions will be decided by your own choices. Exile frowned as he clasped his hands under his chin as he studied the message. It's fairly simple. The higher your Pantheon's tier, the more likely you are to swing a vote in favor of what you want. Domestic and foreign affairs are self-explanatory, but I'm guessing every city or main city for each of the races is the same. But this says it logs complaints and events from all realms. Does that include the mortal realm then? From what he could see, Beartooth appeared to be right. This mechanism could likely keep them in check to some degree. It was looking more appealing now to form a few alliances, as he read the notification. How much will these votes affect the game between sessions? I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one, but we'll have to be wary of the consequences. Let us deal with the first domestic issue. Valheim stated as he pushed out a new notification. 1. Domestic resources. Many gods are complaining about the lack of divine beasts and creatures near Valheim. What should be done about this? Option A. Reduce Valheim's divine interference, allowing these beasts and creatures to enjoy greater fertility, resulting in a population boom. Option B. Do nothing. Exile's eyes went wide as he read the first issue they had to vote on. This is insane. He quickly glanced around to see similar stunned expressions on those around him. This was the equivalent of the developers allowing their players to decide how many mobs would be in the area. Are they really planning on leaving these decisions to us? You have 1 minute to cast your vote. Valheim's voice boomed out, startling everyone present. Exile cursed under his breath as he quickly tried to weigh the pros and cons. If he chose option B, then nothing would change and there would be fierce competition for the mobs as more players ascended. However, option A did not give any indication as to how much the number of mobs would increase. What if it's not just a little, but a lot? But more mobs will give everyone a chance to level up quickly with the milestones. Exile felt the pressure building up as he quickly cast his vote just before time ran out. I hope I didn't make the wrong choice. He sighed as he leaned back on his throne and closed his eyes. However, before he could feel too relieved, a new notification appeared. Exile's eyes went wide as he quickly scanned its contents. Chapter 93. War is coming. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 2. Domestic. Civil war. A number of Skardians are no longer happy under the rule of their current king for their areas. A civil war is brewing, and it is time for the Pantheons to decide what side they stand on. This vote will determine temporary allies and enemies. Option A. Join the side of the current rulers of Skardia. Option B. Join the rebel factions and help to overthrow the current rulers. Warning. There is a corresponding quest detected. If you choose option A, you will abandon the quest. Exile did not have to think twice about this issue as he cast his vote. What had surprised him was the fact that he would now automatically gain allies in this fight. Well, that also depended on who else voted the same as him. These sessions really will hold a lot of weight in the future. I'll have to see what I can find out about raising my Pantheon's tier. Exile hummed as he waited for the next notification. 3. Foreign. Enemy. A holy war has been declared by a Skardian Pantheon against a Samardan Pantheon. Does the council vote to elevate this war to a divine war? A divine war will turn Skardia and Samardan into national enemies in the mortal realms. The gateway between the separate divine realms will be opened, allowing the war to also take place in the divine realms. Option A. Elevate the holy war to a divine war. As the instigator of this issue, your vote has been automatically placed for this option. Option B. Abstain from elevating the war status. Exile glanced around nervously as he wondered how many of the players present knew that he was responsible for this issue. To be fair, at the time he had no idea that it would be brought up in a setting like this, where it could alter everything for the entirety of Scardia as well as the players. All issues have now been voted on. I will now send the results that will reflect how the votes affect you. Valheim almost sounded smug as a push notification made its way into Exile's mind. 1. Domestic Resources, Result. Option A, Note. Beasts, creatures and monsters will now be more numerous in the Scardian Divine Realm. 2. Domestic. Civil War, Result. Option B, Note. You and members of your Pantheon will be unable to harm anyone in the rebel factions. Your followers will be more friendly to fellow rebels. 3. Foreign. Enemy, Result. Option B, Note. The Scardian Council of Gods has refrained from elevating the war status. Warning. This has had an effect on the Sommerdan Council's options. Exile felt his heartbeat rising rapidly as he read through the results. He had voted for option A on the first issue, so he was glad to see it get passed. He did not really have a choice on the second issue due to his quest, and he was glad to see that the others voted no to elevating the war. Which was the right move as far as he could see. Especially as they would be dealing with a civil war as well. However, those around him wore the same concerned expressions that he did. Everyone was caught up on the warning that their vote affected Sommerdan's options. Exile swallowed a lump of saliva as he thought about Parthas. How influential can he be? He'll probably want to elevate it on their end. Then there's the fact the Scardian NPCs have been raiding their mortal country. The votes are now in for the other councils. I will now send you the results of all and any votes that affect Scardia. Valheim suddenly stated, startling the players present. Sommerdan has declared a divine war on Scardia. The pathway between the divine realms has been opened. The Avatar spell will no longer have a cost if used to join the war in the mortal realms. Defeat in the mortal realms will prevent the use of Avatar for one natural day. Cries of outrage echoed around the chamber. Their contents were much the same as they cursed whoever had started a war with Sommerdan. Exile kept a straight face as he listened, determined not to give anything away, while a cold sweat broke out on his back. Surprisingly, nobody pointed the finger at him. Was nobody there in a pantheon? Or was there just no other leaders? I'll have to be careful for a while. Exile sighed as he glanced from one angry face to another. This is going to cause problems with the civil war. This council session is now over. You may now exit the tower. Valheim's voice sounded one last time as the various players began to file out. The shock of the event was still fresh in their minds. Many were busy making their own plans as they tried to figure out how they could take advantage of this mechanic in the future. As Exile was busy with his own thoughts, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He frowned as he turned to face its owner, only for his eyes to narrow in disgust. Don't think for a moment that I've forgotten about you. Aerie smiled sweetly as she stared directly into his eyes. I hope we're on different sides in this civil war, because I'm going to bury your pathetic pantheon. Sure. If we don't bury you first. Exile sneered as he brushed her hand away. Exile. Aerie shouted in rage as she stared at his back. There's no version of this where you win. Surrender now and join Kaleidoscope. Exile turned around with a confused expression. For the life of him, he could not figure out why she would invite him to her own pantheon. Sorry, but why would I surrender to a third-rate player like you? Aerie's expression turned to shock at the venomous words. Much like those around them that had heard Exile's bold words. Some leaders secretly praised Exile while others swore to avoid him at all costs in case they drew the ire of Kaleidoscope. Chapter 94. Sinister Plan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Exile stormed directly out of the tower. Anyone who saw his expression quickly looked away. The crowd that had been waiting outside were whispering furiously as they tried to figure out what had happened, but they did not have to wait long. Exile frowned as a red glow appeared around a large number of players who were standing in the area around the tower. A civil war is now in effect. Those with a red aura are designated as enemies. Those with a blue aura are your allies. Anyone without an aura is neutral and can be harmed by either side. Valheim is a safe area where you cannot be harmed. Exile's expression darkened as he glared at the sparse amount of blue that he could see. Damn. Most of them voted to stick with the current human rulers. He could not fathom why the majority had voted so, but maybe their situation was different depending on where in Scardia their oracles were based. Notifications are no longer on hold. Milestone. The Ragnarok Pantheon, Tier 0. 2424, you have received +15 authority, new quest detected, quest. Pantheon Ascension. Description. Your Pantheon is ready to step up to Tier 1. To complete the ascension, meet the following requirements and interact with the Pantheon registration tablet in the temple. Requirements. 6 members must reach Tier 1, 0 out of 6, 100 soul tokens, 5 out of 100, rewards. Plus 10 stat points for all members. Gain a personal realm for your Pantheon. Exile's eyes widened in shock at the sudden notifications. To make sure it was not some twisted joke or a glitch, he quickly checked his stats. Authority. 44, the sudden jump in stats made him feel strange. It placed his authority at roughly double of what Parthas had when they had clashed. A deep frown appeared on his face as he wondered how strong Parthas would become if he got a full Pantheon behind him. This is only borrowed strength, though. If anyone leaves or gets banned, then my authority will reflect that. Exile brooded over the matter as the crowd started to surround the leaders who had exited the tower, demanding answers. I should make use of this while I can. A sly smile appeared on his face as he pushed his way through the crowd, under the watchful eyes of Eri. Upon his return to the Raider's Horn, he was suddenly bombarded with questions from Clay and the others who knew him well as soon as he set foot inside. Exile looked around at the now crowded bar as he motioned for everyone to calm down. There were plenty of new faces that he did not recognize, but he guessed these were the players the others had recruited. It took him a while to explain everything that happened inside the tower and how it affected them. Exile. This is madness. Clay sighed as all eyes in the room turned towards him. From what you're saying, we're basically enemies with the majority of the players in Valheim now. Many of those present nodded in agreement with concerned expressions clearly written on their faces. Others started to wonder if they should quit Ragnarok already to avoid being caught up in all the hassles. However, Exile smiled strangely as he met Clay's gaze. Don't worry about that. There's too much going on for everyone to focus on us. Samardan is likely to launch an assault. There's also the increase of mobs around here, but we need to find out how bad it is. Beyond that, I have a plan. Exile's grin turned savage as he explained what he had in mind. Much to the delight of the others, who suddenly became excited. Roughly an hour later, when they had settled on the details, the members of Ragnarok filed out of the bar together. Exile wore a stern expression as he led the group, who threw taunts at any red player they passed on their way to the city gate. Their display drew a lot of interest at a time when everyone was afraid to be the first to step outside of the safe area. Nobody wanted to become targets after all. However, the curious onlookers and the affronted players followed the group to see if they really did have the guts to take that step. Exile glanced around to see how many blue players were following them. It's as I guessed. We really are outnumbered. Exile shook his head slowly. This was just a display to make the players following them think he had misjudged the situation. In reality, he was thrilled. By the time they had reached the gates, the crowd had grown exponentially. Many of them were furious with the way his Pantheon members had been acting. So full of themselves as they continued to throw out insults and taunts. Ha ha ha. Look at this. I didn't think you would be so eager to die. Aerie shouted joyously over the crowd as she pushed her way to the front with everyone from Kaleidoscope. Should I thank you for the early birthday present? The crowd jeered at Exile and his Pantheon, thinking that they were idiots. However, Exile smiled back as if she was of no concern to him, which really got Aerie irritated. Sorry, I don't speak idiot. Come back when you find a translator. Exile grinned as he insulted Aerie straight to her face. Aerie's face flushed red as she glowered at him in return. She just could not understand why Exile was being so foolish. However, she quickly calmed down when she thought about the orbs they would be able to collect if they really did leave the city. I promise to bury your Pantheon. Why don't you step outside so we can settle this? Aerie's forced smile twitched as she addressed Exile in front of the crowd. And I promise to bury you first. Let's see if your spine is as strong as you're making it out to be. Loud gasps escaped from the crowd as Exile quickly ran out of the gates. Chapter 95. Taking advantage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Aerie grinned madly at Exile's foolishness as she quickly chased after them. The entirety of the Ragnarok Pantheon had stepped out of the safe zone. Many players screamed in delight as it became a mad dash to get out of the gates to try to claim their victims. However, Exile and the others were all smiling. This was what they were waiting for. Now. Exile roared, as he quickly turned and braced himself. Their enemies wore dazed expressions as they collided with Ragnarok, whose members had formed a circular wall that prevented too many enemies from getting out of Valheim. Aerie cursed as she drew a two-handed battleaxe from her inventory and struck Exile's shield. The latter tilted his shield arm, so the weapon slid along the face of his shield and struck the ground. Exile laughed as he punched out with the rim of his shield and slammed it into Aerie's nose as she was off balance. She groaned as she tried to step back, but the throng of players behind her prevented her from going too far. Her eyes went wide as she looked around at the situation. Most of Ragnarok was losing ground due to being new to the divine realm, but she had a distinct feeling that something was wrong. Let's do this. Exile roared savagely as he raised his axe to point at the crowd before him. Several others seemed to be thinking along the same lines as Aerie, but were unable to cast their spells. This was because of their allies in front of them. Their spells would not hurt them, but at the same time, they blocked the path of the spells to any members of Ragnarok. Only those on the front line could attack them. The head of Exile's axe glowed red with heat as he activated Cleansing Flame. Unlike the divine spells of his enemies, Cleansing Flame excelled in dealing with crowds. It was not a solid projectile type and instead washed over and around the frontline players to strike those behind them as well. You have dealt 5 HP, 0.23 HP, 0.34 HP, 0.9 HP. 26 HP, retreat. Aerie screamed frantically from within the flames, but the surrounding players had already reacted. Under the cover of Exile's flames and the retreating enemies, the other members of Ragnarok quickly gathered any orbs that fell from Exile's onslaught. He pursued the crowd as they rushed into the gap that the players still within Valheim created for them as they shrunk back from the flames. Most of the players who had chased them fell to the surprise attack and became bright motes of light. The ones who survived either managed to enter Valheim in time or were Pantheon leaders with a decent amount of members. Aerie's body trembled in outrage at being embarrassed like that. As she turned to scream at Exile, she found him standing right in front of her. She flinched before she realized that both of them were now within the city limits again. But that just added more insult to injury. Exile smirked as he glanced at the red players around them. Their numbers really did work against them. During the chaos, all of the members of Ragnarok managed to slip back into safety while grinning madly. Each of them knew they had scored big with the amount of orbs they had managed to grab, but it would still be up to Exile how these would be divided. What's wrong, Aerie? I thought you were going to bury us. Exile raised an eyebrow as he spoke in a mocking tone. All I saw was you running with your tail between your legs. Clay and the others burst out laughing as Ares' face turned beet red in embarrassment. However, nobody on her side could blame her. They were not expecting such a move, and the spell that Exile had used was ludicrously devastating to them. Some of them began to find their voices and started to claim he was a cheater. But Ares and the other Pantheon leaders knew better. Most of them had hidden the details of their passive ability for being a king or queen of a pantheon from their members. The only thing that did not make sense to most of them was the fact that Exile had clearly used an elemental spell, which was something they had never seen before. Aerie ground her teeth in frustration. This was the reason that she had wanted access to the shop and began this grudge with Exile in the first place. The members of Kaleidoscope had found information about a powerful item and where they could find the quest to get it. But by the time they turned up to the store, Exile had already been inside. Aerie cursed her bad luck as she imagined what she could do with such a spell. But that was now just a pipe dream. Under the watchful eyes of those they had just taken advantage of, the members of Ragnarok boldly strode through the crowd while laughing. Needless to say, they had definitely made a lot of new enemies with their little stunt. But with the Civil War they were already enemies anyway. As far as they were concerned, they had made huge gains and lost nothing in the process. The atmosphere was lively as they were eager to return to the Raiders' Horn and divide the spoils. The new members let out sad smiles, as they were certain the majority of it would go to the original members. Exile chuckled as he saw their faces when he glanced over his shoulder. "Don't look so glum." The corners of his mouth raised into a smirk as he addressed their new recruits. "Most of the orbs will be used to increase your stats over ours. You guys are the foundation of our Pantheon's strength. If you fall behind, then we won't have the support we need. Remember, Pantheon Online isn't like those other games you're used to. One person can't defeat entire armies of players here." Chapter 96. Strong Foundation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Exile grinned at everyone as their haul was placed on the table in front of him. The Raiders' Horn was full of excited chatter as Ragnarok's members looked on with eager expression. Clay and the other original members were busy gathering everyone's details, such as how many stat points they already had. This way they could fairly distribute the orbs to raise the overall strength of the Pantheon. Of course, Exile still planned to make sure that he, Clay, Buri, Leggy and Dessa remained a level or two above everyone else. This was solely to maintain order in the Pantheon and prevent anyone from getting any funny ideas. Once the information was collected, Clay called the weakest player up to the table, where Exile handed him an orb. Upon using it, he reported his new stats to Clay, who told him to take a seat. It turned out the orb had belonged to a relatively strong player, turning this member from their weakest to the second strongest new recruit. This process continued ere they always called up the new weakest member. If one orb was not enough, they received another. Once every player had reached level 5, it was Clay and the others' turn. These 5 quickly reached level 7. What surprised everyone was the fact that they still had more than half of the pile left to go through, despite reaching this point. Before the next round began, Clay insisted that Exile raise his level to 8 first, arguing that Exile deserved to be a level ahead of them because it was his plan and spell that made this possible. Although he disagreed with this, the new members took Clay's side. They argued that they would feel more secure with a strong leader to back them up when they needed it. Exile let out a long sigh before picking up the closest orb. Once he absorbed it, he waited to see what he would gain. However, his eyes went wide in shock. "You have permanently received +9 strength, +7 endurance, +5 speed, +2 authority, congratulations. More than 70 points of divinity have been detected. You have reached level 8. Congratulations. More than 80 points of divinity have been detected. You have reached level 9, but he quickly realized that this orb had belonged to a player who was level 5. Hence the huge increase in stats. They had already seen something similar with the orb that Midas had received, but they assumed it was likely the only one. Most of the orbs had belonged to players around levels 2 to 4, so it was quite a shock for him to jump 2 levels because of this. The bar erupted in cheers as he told the others the results he received. But before long, they settled down to continue distributing the spoils. In the end, Clay also advanced to level 9 just barely. Dessa, Leggy and Buri settled in the upper end of level 8. Beans and Midas managed to break through to the lower end of level 8 as well, much to the jealousy of their comrades. Winter ended up a few points short, but she was satisfied with being the strongest amongst the rest. Overall, their weakest member ended up only a few points into level 7. Exile nodded happily at the results. Barely an hour ago their weakest member was only level 3, so this had been an amazing haul. Our foundation is strong now, and I'm close to level 10. I wonder what will happen. Exile let out a sigh as the members began to discuss their new spells. It's a shame Eri won't fall for this a second time and everyone will be cautious to keep their distance from now on. He had to admit that it was a risk to expose Cleansing Flame to so many enemies at once. Its range was only suitable for close to mid-range, so as long as they avoided stepping inside that zone, his strongest spell would be useless against other players. Still, it was worth it. We've given them a scare and they'll be unlikely to try anything soon. Hopefully, most of these orbs belonged to Kaleidoscope. That should set them back and give us time to prepare. As he was thinking about how his enemies would react to this move, a nagging sensation appeared in his mind. A deep frown appeared on his face for several minutes as he tried to figure out what the cause was. What's that look for? Clay laughed as he slapped Exile on the back. Look at what we've achieved. We're probably the strongest Pantheon in Valheim now. How can you not be happy? I just feel like I'm missing something. Exile let out a soft smile as he gazed around at the crowded bar. Something important. His eyes fell on Beans, who smiled nervously at him before she turned back to her conversation with Midas. What the two were talking about was anyone's guess, but that sight jogged something in Exile's memory. That's what it is. Exile exclaimed in a low voice full of shock as his eyes remained fixed on Beans. What are you talking about? Clay hummed as he raised an eyebrow in curiosity. Donna. Donna the Great. Exile groaned as he realized what was bugging him. He felt stupid for not realizing it sooner, but he had been caught up in trying to deal with everything quickly, causing him to overlook this matter for too long. Neither Midas nor Winter mentioned her. Even though I sent them to her territory for their challenge. There's no way she just sat back and let all these new players steal her followers. Clay frowned as he wondered why it was so important to Exile that their members had not been challenged by Donna. However, he could sense that Exile was extremely troubled by this matter. Before he could question Exile on the matter, a system announcement interrupted them, causing everyone to become silent as they listened to it in shock. Chapter 97. End of beta. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A player has reached Tier 1. Everyone will now be logged out for one natural day. An announcement will soon be made on the game portal. Colt cursed under his breath as he was forcefully ejected from the game, coming to in his game capsule. His thoughts were a mess as the notification still rang in his ears as he clambered out and dried off the remains of the liquid. Who the hell reached Tier 1? He did not even bother to get changed as he rushed to his computer and booted it up. The hollow screen appeared rather quickly as he began clicking frantically as he navigated his way to the rankings page. A deep frown crossed his face as he quickly discovered his own name. Rank 99. Exile. What the hell? His eyes dashed frantically across the surrounding names, but he did not recognize any of them. How did I fall down in the rankings? Of course, he knew how, but he could not understand it. As far as he was concerned, his growth had been rapid. If anything, he had been expecting to go up quite a bit. It meant that 90.7 other players were closer to Tier 1 than he was, while one player had successfully crossed that boundary already. Colt frowned as he scrolled to the top 10 players. I should have known. He let out a long groan as he read the name of the number 1 player. Rank 1. Arthur, Tier 1 level. Colt slammed a fist on the table as he glared at the name. Why did you have to come back? If Camelot didn't have you, this would be so much easier. His eyes flickered to the other names on the list. Rank 10. Morgana level 9 rank 9. Parthus level 9 rank 8. Redbeard level 9 rank 7. Mordred level 9 rank 6. Aerie level 9 rank 5. Vass level 9 rank 4. Noslin level 9 rank 3. Merlin level 9 rank 2. Warclaw level 9. Colt struck the desk several more times as he read the list. Camelot was dominating the top 10, but that was not his only concern. How the hell did Aerie manage to get ahead of me? Of course, the only explanation was that she had absorbed an orb or two. However, were these orbs that she had stashed away, or had something happened after they had left the gates? He could only curse at how fast she had reacted to the results of her Pantheon's defeat. Now, he could only hope that the rest of her Pantheon had not recovered, and she had taken this step to protect herself from him. The next part that annoyed him was seeing that Parthus had slipped into the top 10 as well. He was beginning to feel a headache starting as one by one his enemies leapt further ahead of him. Although he did feel some satisfaction to see that both Mordred and Morgana had also slipped down the rankings. Everyone in the top 10 is level 9. So it's safe to assume that level 10 is the threshold to advancing. Colt tried to calm down as he read the list again. So why are they hiding Arthur's level? That detail was bugging him to no end. Logically speaking, there was no reason for them to do something like that. They're definitely hiding something about Tier 1. The only issue was what they were hiding. He did not like being in the dark, and Arthur's advancement would give the whole of Camelot an edge if there were prerequisites to meet. Forget it. It's not like I can do anything about it. Colt let out a long sigh as he leaned back in his chair. I have to focus on what we'll do now. Everyone has to get stronger, but there are still so many problems. The civil war, the war with Sommerdan, and I still haven't been able to confirm how the mobs have reacted to the decision made during the council. I wonder if Herrick will be able to return home during this time. If he can, I'll need to focus on that quest. Colt's eyes flashed as he realized another important matter. Damn it. I didn't get the chance to warn Anya that I'd be gone again. At least it's only a day this time. It's not like anything can happen with that amount of time, right? He let out a sigh as the screen flashed to notify him that the developers had made an announcement. As he clicked on it to see what they had to say, David Warsaw's familiar face appeared on the screen. Colt listened carefully to David's polite introduction, hoping to hear a hidden hint as to what was going on. But David was on point and did not elaborate in any way as to how Arthur had reached Tier 1. I know you all must be eager to jump straight back into the game. But I have one last thing to announce. David smiled at the camera playfully as he cleared his throat. Now that Tier 1 has been reached, we have gathered enough data concerning the skill level of every player currently in the game. So I can now announce that the open beta is officially over. Colt's eyes went wide as comments flooded in underneath the video. But David seemed set on ignoring them. Most people just wanted to know how it would affect them. Naturally, Colt was one of these people. These beta versions were strict to discover the level that all of you pros play at before releasing the game to the public. However, this does not mean that just anyone can join. For you amongst the general public who have been angry that we have locked this game to the pros, I say this. Here's your chance. David grinned sadistically before he continued. You can now access the game from your capsule, but there's a condition. You won't enter the game properly unless you can beat the skill challenge we have set. Chapter 98. All things have a price. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Anya sat on a crude chair with Bjorn by her side in the temple. Her eyes were focused on Winter and Midas oracles, who had come to pay her a visit with some of their followers. While Exile was in the council meeting, Clay had informed them that Anya was the head oracle of the Pantheon and that they should get in touch with her. Mikkel, who was Midas' oracle, was busy explaining his plan to increase trade and bring more profit to the temples. As a merchant driven by his newfound love of religion, he had appointed himself as being in charge of their financial affairs. Bjorn nodded with a satisfied smile as he listened to the plans. Michael's plan involved sending more goods from Corden to Iraldsfen to help the village grow. In his mind, it was unsuitable for the head temple of their gods to remain in such a small place. His long-term plan saw Iraldsfen growing to become a bustling trade city that would be unmatched in all of Skardia. Naturally, a lot of the profits from the enterprises of their followers would be offered to the gods. While some would be used to fund new businesses, the growth of Iraldsfen and Corden as well as to afford the construction of bigger and grander temples. As I was saying, it's all about wealth. Not only can it be used to build worthy monuments, but it's a great motivator for men. Think about it. It would definitely be a grand display of the power of our gods. Mikkel laughed as he finished laying out his plans. I agree. The gods will certainly be happy if we can offer them more. But to do that we also need to be wealthy. You have a keen insight, Lord Mikkel. I understand now why Exile felt that Midas Touch was worthy of joining him. Bjorn chuckled as he slapped Mikkel on the shoulder, truly glad to count him as one of their own. Ah, I'm glad that you recognize Lord Midas. To be honest, I was worried that I would lose my life when Lord Exile declared his challenge. If it weren't for Lady Grilla here, I would have certainly met my end at the more brutish oracles. Mikkel nodded as he waved a hand towards Winter's oracle. Her methods are subtle, but she is certainly invaluable. We have built a small joint temple in Corden already. Naturally, Lord Exile's altar has pride of place. Splendid. Bjorn beamed as he turned to face Anya. What do you think? I think his ideas have merit. Everything he has said will definitely benefit the gods. Anya nodded slowly as a frown crossed her face. However, what do you both think about the king's ban on worship? Surely you must be aware that what we are doing is illegal. How do you plan to handle it when the king and his jarls return? This was a subject that Bjorn and she had agreed to raise beforehand. They had to understand if these oracles would help with their plan to make Herrick the jarl of the area once he returned. Which would, of course, give rise to a battle between their followers and the jarl's warriors if he refused to fight a duel for the right to rule the area. That. Mikkel paused for a moment as he searched for the right words. Is tricky. Naturally, we would never abandon the gods to save our own skin. It would be best if the king has died while on his raids. But that would only lead to one of the other rulers of Skardia launching an invasion. Mikkel sighed as he looked Anya in the eyes. Even if we could deal with the Jarl, the king would never let it slide. It would lead to war. And war is costly. Both in gold and lives. Those are wise words. However, you've avoided answering Lady Anya's question. Bjorn sighed as he raised an eyebrow. I will fight if the gods will it. Grilla stated to make her stance clear before anyone even questioned her. Mikkel shook his head slowly as he thought about how things would unfold if the king truly returned. The atmosphere grew tense as Bjorn's eyes narrowed. Meanwhile, Anya nervously chewed on her lip. The odds of their success depended on what Mikkel would say. If Midas condones it, then I will naturally do my part. But I'm not a fighter, so you'll have to excuse me from that. I'll help with supplies and weapons as much as I can. But we have to supplant the Jarl as soon as possible. We can't let him send word to the king, otherwise we'll lose any chance of surprising him. Mikkel said slowly, as he weighed his words carefully. Well said. Bjorn burst out laughing as he clapped Mikkel on the back. Don't worry, I'm sure the gods will be on our side. After all, who is the king to put himself above the gods? You should return to Cordon and prepare your people. Start gathering weapons and supplies. We heard it from Exile himself. Our warriors are already on their way home. So you'll get your chance to prove yourself to the gods soon enough. Mikkel cursed under his breath when he heard that. He had assumed that the king and jarls would not return for many months yet. If they were already on their way home, then the raids must have been a disaster. Mikkel quickly tried to calculate how much time he had and what he could arrange before they were needed. If that's true, then we really should leave right away. There's much to do and we'll have to contact Lord Midas and Lady Winter. We'll send word once we receive their blessing for this endeavor. Mikkel sighed as he glanced at Bjorn and Anya. I hope you know what you're doing. And please, pray to Exile for his help. I have a feeling we're going to need it. Chapter 99. The World Turns. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On a blood-soaked field, heavily armored knights on different sides rained blows down on one another. Getrand, who wielded a mace, savagely beat and dented his opponent's armor as he drove him to the ground. He breathed heavily as his opponent struggled to lift his sword to defend himself anymore. Your king is a fool. He should have accepted our king's offer to merge our countries into one. Getrand laughed as nothing but groans came from the man at his feet. Don't worry. Rejoice. The great god Arthur will smile upon your lands soon enough. Getrand swung his mace overhead and delivered the final blow, putting his opponent out of his misery. His eyes scanned the battlefield to see that they were winning. He could hear the names of the Camelot Pantheon being shouted all over the place. A satisfied grin spread across his face as he gave thanks to the gods for allowing him to defeat his enemies. With Arthur watching over us, we will surely rule all of these lands soon. Getrand thought about the possible future where the commoners would never have to fear war ever again. The other rulers are being too stubborn. They cling to power at the cost of their people. Getrand let out a long sigh as his eyes swept over the piles of bodies. Meanwhile, in a special room somewhere unknown. We have to report to the king at once. Thovok announced as he glanced at the glowing gems in the room. Then, he remembered that he was the only one there. Ugh, I forgot. It's been centuries since anyone else came in here. Thovok's eyes seemed to look into the distant past as he stroked his long grey beard down to his round belly. His eyes wandered over the gems set in the black painted ceiling of the room, resembling something like a bright starry sky. Ichem. The gods have returned. We can finally continue our research. Thovok nodded happily as he walked under the gems, looking at a certain batch in particular. This lot seems to be close if I take the tunnels into Scardia. I have to convince the king to let us make contact. The issue with that was the fact that his race had kept themselves hidden deep underground for all of this time. After the gods vanished, the other races were desperate to pillage their strongholds and steal the wealth that they hoarded. It should be fine if it's the Scardians. Thovok hummed as he remembered fighting by their side centuries ago. We had a good relationship with them and they never turned on us. He shook his head slowly as he turned to leave the room. Stepping outside, he looked over the edge of the suspended bridge that led here. The city below was bustling with dwarves mining the rock to expand the city and going about their daily business. We'll finally step foot outside of the mountains once again. A glimmer of light appeared in his eyes as he watched his kinsmen unknowingly go about their daily routines. Meanwhile, in a dark forest far away, Amryd lashed out with her dagger and only just managed to deflect the sharp claws aimed towards her. The small amount of sunlight that broke the canopy reflected off her dark gray skin and white hair as she spun to face her assailant. Surrender. A low growl escaped from her enemy. You dark elves are all the same. The moment the gods returned you went back to your old ways. And what about you? We knew that you war beasts would do the same. Amrita stared silently at the heavily armored panther-type warbeast as he walked towards her on two legs. His green feline eyes studied her every movement. "We are merely preparing. This was not for you but to deal with the other tribes and make them understand our gods are the ones they should worship." Amrita snorted as she prepared herself to flee. She did not buy his story in the slightest. Before the warbeast could get any closer, she used the spell she had at the ready, allowing her body to meld into the shadows of the forest. The warbeast roared in outrage as he sniffed at the air, trying to catch her scent. Meanwhile, in a rocky outcrop near the edge of a waterfall, Kargra, a war chief of the Red Orcs, kneeled before what looked to be a large boulder. He grunted in low tones several times, as if he were becoming impatient. Suddenly, the boulder began to move. The front of it was actually 4 rocky arms wrapped around the creature's legs as it was curled up to sit there. It stood up on 2 legs at a towering height of 7.5 feet. Kargra looked up into the ancient rocky eyes that stared down at him and swallowed. "Great Eldon. The gods have returned. We orcs remember what most do not. Join us. And we will reclaim your lost lands." The Eldon stared long and hard at Kargra before nodding its head slowly. A humming noise echoed from its body as it turned towards the waterfall. Several minutes passed before the Eldon waved its hands through the air like a conductor of an orchestra. The flowing water moved away from the rock and turned horizontal as it led far away into the lands below. Kargra grinned as he stroked his broken tusk. "These lands have kept us prisoner for long enough." At the same time that these events were happening in other places, horns blew on the docks of a Skardian coastal city. The people chattered excitedly as they rushed to see the ships that had been spotted. Most of them were excited to see what treasures they would carry, while others were concerned about what would happen to them with the return of their king. The whole world was on the move. What changes it would bring in the future was anyone's guess. There were still 5 game days left until the players would return. But what new problems and exciting opportunities would be waiting for them? Chapter 100. Real-life problems. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Colt watched the timer carefully, as it was almost time to reconnect to the game. His eyes scanned the forums for any new information, but it was just full of people's theories about Tier 1. There's no mention of being able to wield your element at Tier 1. Colt hummed as he read the different theories. It means that everyone who knows that isn't sharing the information. He agreed with this approach. If someone spilt the beans, then it would be harder to catch people off guard when he reached that stage. He knew that it was a race against time now. If Aerie reached Tier 1 before he did, then he was certain that she would make his Pantheon pay for their stunt. He navigated to their Pantheon page where the first video had been uploaded. Above the video player was his Pantheon's emblem, with Ragnarok written in runic symbols below. He had watched it himself and he had to admit that the editors did a great job. Nothing that they wanted to keep secret had been added to the footage. Of course, Colt had received the answer to his worries concerning Donna when he watched their own video. Surprisingly, the footage also contained scenes from their followers. "I still can't believe Bjorn killed her oracle." However, this just gave him something new to worry about. Although Donna had been banned, she would be among those who could return to the game. What if she comes back under a different name? How could I deal with that? His eyes moved to the view counter as he considered that problem. Surprisingly, the video had already gained a lot of views as people shared it all over the internet. This was due to how they had used their enemies' numbers against them to quickly kill a lot of them. It got tongues wagging as people started discussing different ideas to try something similar. He could only sigh at the comments section. "It seems I've started something. We might need to be more careful in the future so we don't fall prey to these plans." Colt shook his head slowly as he looked at the requests to join his Pantheon from different players. He took his time to send out a mass email to the majority of them that stated that they were not accepting members at this time. while those that piqued his interest received one that stated they would be the first to be considered during their next recruitment. Naturally, he had no idea when that would be. He would have to increase the Pantheon's tier first to find out what effects it would have. Out of curiosity, he navigated to Camelot's page. He had refrained from doing this so far, but he wanted to see for himself how they were dealing with the game. When he clicked on the video, he received a surprising message. You are a current member of a different Pantheon. This video is currently unavailable to you. Colt frowned as he read the message. Damn. They never mentioned this. He cursed under his breath as he thought of how he could gain information. But even if someone else told him, it would be second-hand information. There was the risk that they would miss key details or not understand just how amazing or poor some of their actions would be. I guess this is just another method to help protect us from each other. Colt sighed as he admired the developers' wisdom on this matter. The edited footage would keep their secrets, the delay would make it impossible to use the videos to target other Pantheons, and hearing information second-hand was unlikely to tell them what they really needed. The minutes slowly ticked by as he absent-mindedly scrolled through the forums yet again. Apparently, a number of people had already passed the test that the developers put in place for the masses to have a chance to join in the game. The competition is bound to heat up with so many new pros and unknowns joining. Hopefully, I won't have to deal with another batch like Winter and Midas. This was his main concern for now, as he would no longer have a way to deal with them outside of using force. To be honest, he doubted anyone would be stupid enough to challenge him now if they stumbled upon Corden or Iraldsven. The risk of angering his Pantheon as new players were just too great. Even if they had divine protection, there was no way they could expect to last long once they ascended. Colt continued to make his plans for when he rejoined the game. The first step is to warn Anya about the possibility of more gods appearing. Then I need to focus on helping Herrick for my quest and support the others in grinding for mobs. A deep frown crossed his face as he considered the other, more long-term things he had to take care of. I haven't been back to the shop in a while. I definitely need to check out the next floor. Maybe there'll be a clue to the next piece of the first flame. Colt paused for a moment, as the timer only had a few minutes left. As he headed towards his capsule and got changed into the gaming suit, another thing crossed his mind. Then there's the autosphere. With our numbers and levels now, maybe we can further explore those ruins. He felt like the idea had some merit as he lay down and waited for the capsule to start up. Either way, things are bound to become chaotic. Maybe I'll have Clay lead the others out grinding while I take care of Herrick's quest. Hopefully, he's already returned. Colt let out a long sigh as the machine booted up to correspond with the timer. Either way, he could not wait to get stuck back in. Hopefully, we can find some sponsors soon. I can't keep doing this unless I earn something from it. In all of his excitement, he had forgotten about his real-life problems. We'll just have to do something amazing to attract them to our videos. The end of Volume 1. Beta test. See you next chapter for Volume 2. Advent of the New Gods.